Hi, I'm here with Terra today, who's a graduate from the B.S.P.S program in 2019. She's currently in the Master of Science in Pharmaceutical Science program, and she is focusing in Medicinal Chemistry and Pharmacognosy in Dr. Burton's lab. So to start off with, Terra, I just want to ask you what your favourite thing about the B.S.P.S program was.
Okay, so I think my favorite part of the BSPS program was the flexibility that it offered to the students to tailor their curriculum in a direction that they wanted to go in. The Pharmaceutical Sciences program is not incredibly rigid in that it just covers, only a few topics. Instead, it's interdisciplinary. It gathers from chemistry and biology, mathematics, computer science, statistics, physics even, and then classes like writing and communications. And so very early on, that flexibility that was offered to us, even though those are core requirements, allowed me to explore other topics that I was interested in that were tandem to healthcare. And so I found chemistry very early on, and that's the kind of research that I went into as an undergrad. And that's how I ended up in medicinal chemistry research as a graduate student right now.
Yeah, the flexibility is such a huge part of this program, not only just from the required classes, like you said, but when we get a bit older into our junior and senior years and we get to choose professional electives, and that way you can really build your own program, so you can make it whatever you want it to be. For example, I've decided that I want to take a wide range of different classes from the different areas of pharmaceutical science, so I can understand where I want to specialize later on in my career. And if you want to build up a really niche program, you also have the opportunity to do that. So what professional electives did you take as an undergrad?
So going off on the core requirements that were offered for the Pharmaceutical Sciences program, I really wanted to take professional electives in my junior and senior year that were directly related to the core requirements that I really enjoyed, and that was chemistry. And so I took medicinal plants and natural products, drugs, and both of those courses were focused in deriving and studying novel compounds that come from plants that can be used for further drug applications, studying supplements, studying the chemistry behind a lot of these compounds. And that was something that just intrigued me from the beginning. It built upon those general chemistry and organic chemistry foundations that I had in my first 2 years and really showed me a direct application to healthcare. And that was what furthered my studies then as a master's student in medicinal chemistry, where I'm taking courses that are further focused in that field.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of did a similar thing. I actually took natural products last semester. I really enjoyed the class. I like the fact that when you get to the professional elective stage, they're not classic classes that we've been experiencing our whole undergrad. It's not like there's 4 exams and a final and that's it. There's projects. I particularly enjoyed, we did one on making an infographic, and I learned about making scientific diagrams, which was really cool, and I really enjoyed that. So let's talk a little bit about the research that you were involved in as an undergraduate. What lab were you involved in? How did you get involved, and what did you get out of it?
Sure. So I started research the summer after my sophomore year in the Department of Chemistry, and it was in Dr. Matthew Kieswetter's physical organic chemistry lab. I had a really unique experience of getting into the lab in the first place, and that I was invited to join the lab after I took organic chemistry with Dr. Kieswetter as a sophomore. And that kind of invitation that I had to that lab was only because I was visiting office hours several times a week. I was doing all of the extra problems in organic chemistry research. And even though I wasn't very familiar with the type of research that was covered in this particular lab, the foundations that I had in the course, and then the dedication from the graduate students and then from Dr. Kieswetter himself to teach me and catch me up to speed was what allowed me to stay in that lab for 2 years up until I graduated.
That's a really interesting point about not necessarily having the experience to be in the lab, because I was quite intimidated by that. At the start, I wasn't sure if I would fit because I didn't really have a lot of experience, but actually you don't need much experience, and that's the whole point. You're an undergraduate in a lab, and everyone is more than happy to teach you and help you and get you the skills that you need to be successful in that lab. So not necessarily having the skills is not a reason why you should be afraid to reach out and join a lab, because everyone is really welcoming and they will be happy to teach you. And it's also an interesting point about how you got involved in the lab. So you were actually invited to join the lab, which is a really amazing opportunity for you, but it might not necessarily come about that way for everyone who wants to get involved. So for me, I reached out to the professor whose lab I'm in, and it was actually during the summer break. I emailed him and he responded saying we should set up a Zoom call for a chat. So I was actually back in England at the time, but it was perfect because we have Zoom now. So we could talk on Zoom about whether or not I would be a good fit for his lab. And then he was happy to have me. And I've started this semester with very little molecular biology skills because I was previously in a medicinal chemistry lab. So I wanted to learn the molecular biology skills that I might need in my career. And he was really happy to have me as part of the lab. If you're reflecting on your time in the lab, what skills did you think you've learned specifically that really helped you as a graduate student?
Of course. And I think I can split those skills like in half. There's some of those like intangible social skills that you learn in the lab. You learn how to do things quickly. You learn to ask the right questions to the right people. You learn how to prepare data sets and graphs. Excel really is sometimes a learning curve. You learn how to prepare and edit manuscripts. You learn how to be able to present your research confidently. Usually labs have things called group meetings where you're sometimes able to share your research to your PI and to your other group members, and then you bounce ideas off each other. You learn not to be intimidated when somebody might give you a criticism of your research protocol, and that is not necessarily a reflection of your research skills or your abilities, but rather they're trying to help you to further that project along. So you really learn to take constructive criticism properly. You learn to give it as well. And then in terms of some of the unique skills that I learned, like I was mentioning earlier, I learned how to run NMRs and be able to interpret them. And NMRs are called nuclear magnetic resonance. And it's a specific way to analyze specific polymers and molecules. And it was a really unique skill to learn because you only learn about it through a textbook when you're taking organic chemistry, or you don't even learn about it at all. It's not covered in every course. You also learn things like pipetting skills and rotovap and all these things that are kind of unique to chemistry that might be translatable to other labs in other fields, or they might not be. But regardless, you learn how to do things well, and you learn how to, that practice makes perfect. And it's really wonderful now being a graduate student because I take all of those skills with me throughout graduate school, and I'm perfecting them and polishing them along the way.
The lab meetings are a really key point in your personal development, having the confidence to present your research, which is something that if you're going into it as a career, you're going to have to do, very regularly. So that's really important. So if you were to give a piece of advice to an undergraduate student, maybe a sophomore BSPS student, what would you say to them about getting involved in research?
So with regards to getting involved in research, you may not know exactly what you want to do, and that is completely fine because you're building that along the way from your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years and beyond. And you're learning with every semester, every course you take, every experience that you have on campus and beyond. So I think if you have a general idea of what you want to do, especially if that was inspired by one of your core classes that you took in your freshman and sophomore years, go and reach out to that professor. Be proactive. Even if you don't have, say, a question in office hours about the homework or the exam at hand, go and introduce yourself. Go look on the websites. Professors are really good at updating their research websites because they want to attract really good undergraduates and graduate students. That's the whole point of keeping the lab and the research flowing and going. So going to office hours, introducing yourself to professors, talking about the skills that you may be able to contribute to the lab, and they don't have to be very professional research-oriented skills, but it can be saying, I'm really hardworking, really curious about what you're doing. This is what I want to do with my career X years from now. How do you think that we could be able to work together to do that? And you would be so surprised of how easy it is to get a great position. And so many of my classmates and colleagues, and now for graduate students that I know in the lab, that's how they got involved.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add to that one thing that professors really love is when you read their research, their papers that they're on, and you can find them all on their research websites. And I personally always read a couple of papers if I'm going to reach out to a professor so that I can understand what their lab is, because it's a lot, it's their whole life's work, and they are interested if you're interested. So that's one way that is really nice to start a conversation with a professor. You will then have something to talk about, and they can understand that you care about what they're doing, which is a really big part of that.
Yeah, I definitely say don't go in completely not knowing what that professor does. It's okay. But if you do have the time to go and research their research and go and read a few of their journal articles and get a feel for what their lab does, that's even better, because then you'll be able to tailor the conversation and say that I may not have these skills, I may not have this experience, but I read this journal article, I read your paper, I really like this experiment, I want to now get involved in that.
So I just wanted to finish off by thanking you so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck with your studies in your master's.
Thank you, and likewise.